Yeah.
All right. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for being here on such a nice breezy night. It's appreciated. I'm Dan Jones with the White Bear Lake Area Historical Society, and we're here to present Outhouse Oddities. We have Mr. Local Mark Youngblood, who I've literally known, sadly, my entire life. Sadly, on both our parts, I think. Our parents were very, very, very good friends, especially our dads. But he's here to talk privy digger and collector, but probably more. You're probably going to get more information than you wanted. But it's actually, and I don't mean that way. It's fascinating. And so what I just put together a quick little outline of a PowerPoint. I do need to thank Ramsey County Library, so thank you, and the Clean Water and Land Legacy Act. Without that, we would not be here talking, so I appreciate those fundings. And as always, our members. We have one of our board of director members here back in the back, Janine Roush. Hi, Janine, how are you? Thanks for being here. And, Mark has had some notoriety. He's been in several magazine publications. On the cover of White Bear Press, or on the first page, Outhouse Archaeologist. And I've run into some archaeologists that don't exactly appreciate what you do.
That's true.
And I'm like, why? Well, sorry if you're an archaeologist here. But I'm like, okay, but if it wasn't for them, these would never be literally unearthed. We would have no clue. So if you're not going to do it, why can't they? They're literally digging up history. And the history is what's so cool for me is the history connected locally. I mean, they're digging up bottles that were used and thrown away in that town, in that where it was bought and used, and that's pretty cool. We're going to watch a story. He got featured just last March on a WCCO news story. We're going to see that just right after this. Ooh, come on. Sorry. Just pictures that you're going to see more of, but it's like these were fun. Getting out of the... There's those creepy doll heads. I'm not a big fan of them. Ever since they found the Titanic and they had one on the floor, they spooked me. They're like clowns. Clowns are horrific. But these were two of my favorite pictures, and I wanted to make sure and highlight them. Look at the amount that came out of one dig.
Right one's Pine City.
Yeah, that one's Pine City.
I mean, that's... I don't know if the family needed a lot of elixir or, I don't know, but man,
the guy in the middle, that pit in the middle, picture in the middle, there was 9 pits in that yard, and there was about 800, 900 liquor bottles. That was in Brainerd.
Wow.
There's a second pit being dug, in the back picture of that one. There's a second picture far in the back. You see right in the upper right-hand corner, there's another body there digging. There's a tarp where this guy's at, and there's a tarp back there.
Oh, right back in the, yeah. We'll bring up that CCO report.
Well, if you have a home that's more than a century old, you may have wondered what's below the surface of your backyard.
In this week's Finding Minnesota, John Lorson shows us how one group is unearthing a bit of history.
Teal green, it's very hard to find this particular bottle.
Minnesota is full of all kinds of collectors.
Spa bottling out of St. Paul, Minnesota. They call that a hutch.
They can grow their collections through flea markets, estate sales, and even eBay.
One of the favorite ones right here.
Como whiskey, that's got to be in St. Paul.
Mark Youngblood built up his old bottle collection by digging down.
How many bottles do you have now, Mark?
It's a good question. I haven't counted, probably over 10,000.
We could count them today just to make sure.
Yeah, you got to have a little bit of time for that.
He began bottle hunting when he was 12. Nearly 50 years later, his hobby shows no signs of slowing down. He's even turned his home into a mini museum. And in some circles, he's known as the Outhouse Archaeologist, because that's where he finds his treasure. Outhouse pits are also called privies, and many older homes in Minnesota can have up to a dozen privies buried in their yard, where people discarded all kinds of trash, from doll heads to dentures.
I have another spot in Brainerd where we dug. We had 9 pits in one backyard.
The Department of Archaeology says it's against the law to dig on state or federal land without a permit, and even on private property, the practice is discouraged, but it's not illegal. Mark says his team first gets permission from a homeowner, and then they make sure there are no lines in the ground before they dig, slowly, by hand.
But there's something right below.
Even then, they work in teams for safety's sake.
Brainerd's been dug heavy. I've dug St. Paul, Minneapolis. I've dug a lot of digging in Plainview, Minnesota.
The passion Mark feels in White Bear Lake is shared on the other side of the Twin Cities.
We're looking for something that nobody's ever seen before.
Brian Mann has been on Outhouse digs, but his collection in Zimmerman has also grown from buying and trading. Over the years, he's come across beer, whiskey, soda, and even ancient snake oil bottles, magic elixirs, which once held a variety of concoctions.
This is a Wiles megaphone, and it says it's a whiskey bottle, and this is very rare.
When you find something like this, you research it.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was until I researched.
And that's part of the thrill. Coming across old newspaper clippings, highlighting a century-old whiskey or soda company that was only around for a few years. For these collectors, bottles quench their thirst for discovery.
It's exhilarating. The thrill of having something that's 125, 140 years old, piece of artifact that's in your hand that hasn't seen the light of day for 150 years.
John Lordson, WCCO News.
Mark is a frequent guest speaker at historical societies across the state. He, Brian, and other collectors will take part in their annual antique bottle show on April 6th at the Knights of Columbus Event Center in Bloomington.
All right, enough commercials for you. Yeah.
What? It was in March.
All right, so this is just a compilation that Mark had some videos. So Mark, I'm going to have you kind of take over
Okay.
and kind of just walk through. And I'm going to restart it. I tried to take video what I thought was like kind of a quick overview of beginning to end, because I wanted to know, how do you get started? You know, where do you start the whole process from?
This shows us probing up a pit. When you poke in the ground with this thing here, it's got a little bead at the bottom. So when I push this in the ground, I'm only pushing this much. I'm not pushing the whole rod. That would just wear me out fast. And it's got a howell tube here. And you can just feel it. When I poke down, I can feel it. It's soft. We have these in 4.5, 6 and 8 foot long pieces of spring steel. And I can feel it breaking glass, or I can feel it going through ash. I can tell what's down there basically. Wood ash, coal ash, glass. Pottery is kind of hard to tell. It kind of sounds like glass, but this is how I find it. And it's a customized tool we make ourselves. And I don't have a dull point on the end there, not sharp. So I don't find Mr. Gasline or Mr. Electricity by accident. I'm allergic to that. Here's an example of us digging in, I believe that's Plainview, Minnesota, where it's slimy and gumby. Yeah, that was Plainview. Or Stewart, Minnesota, clay. And that was exercise. That lady had a good time. She was going through everything we threw up in the pile. She was going through every little thing and checking every little morsel out. That's from an Eau Claire dig. We dug several pits in Eau Claire. There's part of a doll head. Doll egg. We usually have an entourage when we go digging. Sometimes there's 5 to 8 of us. There's a lot of people come watch us what we're doing. There's me finding something good and teasing someone else about it. We throw the dirt on the trampoline tarp so you can't really tell where we've been. Trampoline tarp's stronger than the tarps they sell. That's my digging partner Nate from Eau Claire. That's a chamber pot right there. Someone made a boo-boo and it fell in. No, I don't think, no. I actually have a small collection of ones. I got them outside of the yard. That's Devaney, and she found us on front page of Brainerd Dispatch, and she knew the guy that I was with, and she had to meet Brian and I, and she's been helping us ever since, basically. That's a fun muddy pit. Do people contact you? People contact me, and I try searching out people. I've had historical society people come find me and say I can get permission for you. Guy in Sandstone did it, Todd Sandell, and we've had 40 permissions up there. A guy in Colfax, Wisconsin found me. We went up to Colfax, Wisconsin, and dug basically the whole town up looking for one bottle. We found the bottle, gave it to the guy that got us permission. So you know in advance that there's Sometimes there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 in a yard. They moved them all the time. They fill them up and they'd move them. And you can see how we got the bottles there, but we got the sod kind of in order come out of the ground. That was a fun one. I like that. That's my favorite, doing that. I think that's it. So anyways, I've been collecting for many years. I've dug about 1,800 privies. Like I said, this is my probe, and this is what I use to find the pit. I can, you got to feel for anomalies, something that's soft, something that's different, and then dig it. We dig it straight down by hand. We call the local utilities and get 811 done. And the variety of artifacts that can come out of the ground is unending. When they did the Stillwater Bridge project years ago, I was out there. I found a lot of Stillwater stuff. Wolf's Brewing out of Stillwater, Minnesota. Nice beer bottle, circa, that one's got a 1907. There's a 7S on that one. Another brewer, you ever hear the Oasis on 95 coming out north out of Stillwater? This is the brewery that used to be there before the cafe is. Frank Eichel Brewing Company. That was where a brewery was. Another Joseph Wolf, block letters, capitalization letters. That came out of the same spot by the bridge. Joseph Wolf again. Cursive writing. This is his earliest bottle right here that I've ever seen with the cursive writing like that and a big slug plate quart. Some bottles I don't even have a full one of. Here's an example. William Heemseth, St. Cloud, Minnesota. The only example, it's a blob, 1870s bottle. Never seen a whole one ever. I've got a Hutch, which is this kind of style bottle. This particular bottle was phased out because it was unsanitary. This particular bottle, people say the pop noise came from pushing this in, but this had a rubber gasket in it, and it was returnable. And when you ship the pop, well, there's no rubber gasket anymore, but it was sitting there, and they would push this in, and it would keep the carbonation, would push that stopper down and keep it cold. But the Pure Food and Drug Law Act of 1906 phased these out, because when this sat in a bottle like this, you really couldn't wash it completely. You couldn't wash it completely. It would be contain dust and stuff, so this would stay inside during the washing process. So any residual, whatever. Apparently it wasn't too harmful because we're all here today. Another bottle I come out of St. Paul, rather rare bottle, Steidling Kais, St. Paul, Minnesota, quart, hand-finished crown, 1900, 1905 bottle. I like this one. It's got a little tiny hint of blue or purple in there. A lot of times we dig plain bottles in the ground. Well, this is what the plain bottle was before. The labels are usually eaten away. Labels are usually eaten away. High grade apricot cordial. Guaranteed under the Pure Food and Drug Act. So the Pure Food and Drug Act, 1906, put a lot of things in perspective. Then they quit selling quack medicine, which is what a lot of these things did. Here's one. I had this polished. It looked like this beforehand. After I got it cleaned, looks like that. That's a $40 process, basically. This particular bottle, how many Scandinavians we got in here? Quite a few. Well, this is Dr. G.W. Roback's Scandinavian blood purifier. Purely vegetable. And it's out of, it clears dyspepsia, and it's a liver complaint. If you got liver problems, this will take care of it too.
Is that just like Norway or Sweden? Were Finns considered?
I guess I guess there was probably fill out. You had to fill out a little form. The guy supposed to buy this.
Yeah, right. Hey, Mark, what is the technology? What is the stamps, or how do you?
Oh, the embossing. Well, the embossing's been around for a long time. Embossing is raised glass letters. The heyday of embossed bottles is 1860s to about 1915, 1920 for the ones I'm after. They made embossed bottles to the 40s and 50s, but they're not as desirable. I mean,
I'm assuming some technology or invention came along to enable to do that on a
mass scale, yes.
scale
Well, custom scale. This one here is a private mold bottle. That whole mold that this guy owned, he owned the whole mold. So the bottle went into his only mold. This one has a slug plate. Slug plate is an interchangeable plate. That's the slug that the guy ordered, and they have the glass house has probably a warehouse of all sorts of different people's stuff, probably in alphabetical order. And they have a slug. Here's a slug plate of a J.C. Hopt, a German from St. Paul, Minnesota, a Hutch soda bottle. This was looking like this. This come off of East 7th by Sweet Hall, not by Sweet Hall, by the Metropolitan University. This came out of a backyard out there. And it was a great find. This particular one here is, and the earlier bottles, the earliest bottle up here that I've got is this bottle here. It's a Blob soda, 1870, 1875 maybe at the latest. And it's J.C. Hopt, again, earlier soda bottle. These were also had a wire bail on them, like this. Reclosable bail, basically. They call it a Putman stopper. But here's the stopper on a different bottle. And this bottle is returnable. These were all returnable bottles. 90% of the bottles up here are returnable. And you get them back, and after a while, they get scratched up. And a lot of them on the bottom have the guy's number because they were sitting in a case like this in the bottom. Some of the other bottles, like here's a Drury's and Sons. That's over at Payne and Minnehaha. Here's a particular tough version. This bottle not to be sold on it. On the very bottom, it's embossed. This bottle not to be sold. There's a booklet to hand around here too. People can look at it if you want to. It's a booklet to hand around. And this was done because George's Bottling Works stole my bottles, and I want my bottles back. So you can't use my bottle with my name on it at another bottling concern. You can't use it. That's why this bottle not to be sold. As far as earlier bottles, here's a stoneware beer bottle. This would be a mystery. I don't know if I would want to drink out of this after you think about it, because it could be a mouse in here and you can't see it when it's refilled. You know, it could be a mouse in here or something. You can't see in there, and But if you're hammering a few of these, it probably doesn't matter if you're drinking mouse juice or not. What'd you say? Oh yeah. If the mouse is there, you didn't have to pay for it, so it's free, but it's a bonus. Drugstore bottles, variety of drugstore bottles. I had the pleasure of digging a bunch in Stillwater recently. Richard and Georgiane, Stillwater, Minnesota druggist, embossed. A lot of these druggists use paper labels as well. Considering right here is Alex Richard paper label on the back, which with the concoction was in it and embossed on the front. And I didn't clean it because I didn't want to wreck the paper label that was with it. When we're digging, lots of times other things get found.
So if I'm a druggist or pharmacist today and I want to order, I've got my own elixir and I want to order my own bottles, what process?
You'd go look at a catalog. There's catalog. I've got a catalog at home that shows different fonts and salesman fonts and stuff, different fonts, and the supply is endless. And then every thing that gets it costly now is that the guy wants to, you get the small size, you keep going up the graduates, the size. Every embossed bottle that's a 2 ounce, you can't use the 2 ounce slug plate on a 6 ounce bottle. You have to have different sizes. A 2 ounce plate, a 4 ounce plate, 6 ounce plate, 12 and a 16. And this one's got the monogram of the guy's name, Olaf Lee, pharmacist, St. Paul, Minnesota. Here's a bottle that came out terribly filthy. We dug it up. First, I didn't even know it was embossed. It's a beautiful blue bottle that came out of Menominee, Wisconsin. This was called a run right when we found it, after we found out it had embossing on it. A run right means you run right to the car with it, so you don't break it. You got to run right to the car with it. And then here's a thing that's going to interest people. Here's a couple of bottles or doll's heads that come up. I give these away to people when they're digging. I give a lot of stuff to homeowners. A lot of stuff. Here's another doll head. They're kind of freaky, but I know a gal that collects them, and I give her most of them. She loves it. She got many permissions. Doll's head. There's a fabric body. The legs and the arms are porcelain, and some of them have eyes that actually moved. They actually would move. There's a story. I was in a privy up in Elk River, 1992, 1996, something like that. We're digging this yard. Go down. Also, we find this doll's head. There's a 92-year-old woman there. And she had her cousins come over in like 1920 or something like that from Chicago. And they were playing with their dolls. When the relatives left, the doll head was missing. We found it 80, 90 years later, and she showed her grandma, or whatever, who had lost it. Where did you find that? We found it in the privy. When my cousins came from Chicago, it disappeared, and they threw it, and they broke it, and they hid the evidence in the privy. So if you have here's an interesting bottle. Grant's Cold Cure for liquor and drug habits. This was cured drinking. It's supposed to cure drinking. You're supposed to drink this and you turn gold. And if you turn gold and you go to the saloon keeper is supposed to turn you away. Didn't work. But it's a rather rare bottle. And it says Grant's Cold Cure for liquor and drug habits. And drug habits. So this would give, probably had something that probably gave you a tingle. What?
In the Twin Cities here, which companies were producing them?
The glass bottles?
Yeah.
They came mostly out of Streator, Illinois, and Milwaukee. A lot of the bottles came from Illinois.
All right, so you could just
Put an order and it would ship by train. It would go on rail and they'd have rail cars full of the stuff. Castleton, J.J. Eichten. Everyone familiar with Eichten Buffalo Farm on 8 up there? And this is one of their relatives' bottles right there. J.J. Eichten was a huge liquor dealer in Stillwater way back when. That's a back bar decanter. And then here's a Maplewood bottle. Maplewood, Minnesota. J.F. Weaver's wash and return, probably 1920s, 30s milk bottle, Gladstone, which is now Maplewood. Took me a little research to find out what this is from. We had dug this in St. Paul on a hill bank, and I'm like, this has got to be local. And then we did a little research, and there was just a snippet of this guy having problems with the Food and Drug Administration or something like that. He had some kind of problem, and that was just a sentence long, and that's where we got the information in the newspaper. Someone thanks to some historical society for photographing all these old newspapers, because we never would have known about it. Here's a bottle that's place is still in business. Freeman's Drugstore, River Falls, Minnesota, or River Falls, Wisconsin, I should say. There's still a concern there. They still work. Anyways, I can tell you some stories about some of the pits we dug. We've been entertainment for weddings, but entertainment for birthday parties. We've had graduation parties. We had one wedding in Malacca, Minnesota. We dug the privy, and all the guests were with their dress and stuff, watching us dig, and they were drinking. And of course, everyone was having a good time, and they would just loved it. We had another time in Menominee, Wisconsin, where I'm digging, and we go knock on this lady's door. They're selling the house. It said for sale on it. So 3 weeks is the only time we got, because it's supposed to be closed on in 3 weeks. So we go back to the next weekend. There comes this little girl that come out. We got there at 8 o'clock, and she was leaving to go to church with her parents. Nice white dress on and everything. I don't want to go to church, Mom. You got to go. I don't want to go to church. So they went to church, came back. Immediately when we got back, we had two holes done. She got on her knees, dressed right on her knees, sat there and watched us. Her father had to literally wrest her away from the hole, make her change her clothes so she could watch us. And when we were done, after about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were done when there's no more holes. She says, you can't leave. He says, what do you mean you can't leave? She says, there's no more pits. I'll take care of that. She says, she marched over and knocked on the next door neighbor's house and got us permission next door. So we actually solved a crime in Brainerd. Oh, it's got to be 15 years ago. We did this 10, 15 years ago. We're digging. My buddy Brian's down there, and he's digging, and he hits this hard stuff at the bottom of the pit. Well, he pulls it up, and we look at it. It's chunks of brass. Brainerd had the Great Northern Railroad go through there. Big building still standing up there in Brainerd. And down there, and he's digging up all these brass chunks. So if you worked for the railroad back when, they had a thing called the railroad dick. And he was a detective, can go into your house with impunity and search for railroad property. If you found railroad property, you were gone. So his buddy George must have gotten caught with some brass or something, And John came home that night and threw everything in the privy. There was like $450 worth of brass in the privy. It was all chunked up and stuff. And I'm a scrapper, so I do scrap metal. So anyways, that brass paid for our trip for the whole year for gasoline. I took it all into the, and there was none of the pieces that had GN on them. If they had Great Northern Railway on them, I would have kept them. But there was just, we had 2 5-gallon pails and a half a 5-gallon pail of brass. And so it was fun. It was real fun. I've had places where we've dug. We had a place in Brainerd. One lady wanted everything. We did a 911 locate. And we come out there in the morning. She comes out there. I want everything, she says. I says, really? She says, yeah, it's my yard. I want everything. I says, okay. So go over and talk to my buddy Brian. I says, she wants everything. Oh, does she? He says. I says, yeah. Okay. He walks over there where we had the flags marked, starts pulling up the flags. What are you doing? You want everything. She says, well, aren't you going to find it? I said, no, we're not going to find it for you. If you want something, you can have something, but we're not going to just dig for free. Picked up all the flags and went next door. We had property permission for the next door neighbor's property too. And she was over there wanting everything. We gave her the broken stuff over there. She didn't keep everything. But so she was. So then I got a great story. A guy told me in Plainview, Minnesota. And then I'll take some questions here in a little bit. About 6:45, take questions, or 6:40? Okay. So we were digging in Plainview, Minnesota, and this guy come up to us and says, I got the story for you, because he saw us digging the privy. I got the story for you. He says, really, really? Yeah, in the 40s, we got brand new buses in Plainview. And they parked the buses in the parking lot. Next to the parked buses was an outhouse pit. So his buddy and his friends took some dynamite, and they threw it in the privy. Privy exploded, and there was all over the buses. So no one wanted to ride the buses anymore, because they didn't want to ride the poop bus. That's what they call it, the poop bus. So then the stories are endless from my privies we dug. I mean, I've been in, I don't know, 80 communities. Stillwater. I've dug a lot in White Bear Lake. I just have never found a White Bear Lake bottle yet. I've got the White Bear beer can, but I don't have the White Bear bottle. And so 15, 20. We actually got into one that was a resort at one point years ago. You could tell it was a resort because there was roller blades, roller skates. There was other evidence of it. It was a huge pit, probably about a third of these tables. Now the pits can be very in depth. Some pits can be 12, 13 feet. Some pits are 4 or 5 feet. 4 or 5 feet are usually in clay. 8, 10, 12, 13 feet can be in sand. And we use many different tools. We dig on trampoline tarps. And every privy is different. Some people, you can tell what they were hiding their stuff. Other places, they couldn't tell. They could care less what they threw in there. Sometimes I dig a privy and there's nothing in it. Another one of my favorite bottles is whiskey bottles. There was over 500 different embossed whiskey bottles from Minneapolis, and maybe 50 from St. Paul at the most. This one happens to be established 1883, headquarters. Silver Pitcher Whiskeys, 107 Washington Avenue North, Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's right in the Skid Row alley. There was liquor dealers up and down Washington Avenue, Minneapolis. Beautiful bottle, pint. This was a throwaway, basically. But this has got embossing on it, and it had a paper label on the back. If you look at this closely, you can see the like line striations in it stuff. It's just how it was made. It's pretty cool. Technology for glass. You ever hear the phrase, mind your P's and Q's? Anyone ever heard that before? You know what that is about? What? Nope. It's mind your pints and quarts. They want their bottles back for deposit. Mind your pints and quarts. So you want to bring your bottles back for deposit. If you don't bring your bottles back, then they charge you more, just like a propane tank nowadays. You know, $40 deposit.
So, Marky, I know you've been all over the place, but you've talked to me prior to this. Like, you've been in some place. Why are there more like hot spots than other locations?
The ground. Clay is a hard thing to dig. Sometimes we go to a clay area like in Red Wing. We can poke them up and probe them, but we can't dig them because I need scuba gear to get the bottles out. Basically, there's too much water there. But sand percolates. So sand, Brainerd sand, White Bear sand, Menominee sand. Menominee has been a phenomenal town for me. one of the best. And then here's another thing that goes on in a lot of these towns. Pits were dipped. They do some dipping, and what goes on is some places had an ordinance. St. Paul had an ordinance about 1888 that you had to dip your pit. You couldn't physically move it and put another hole in. So stuff from St. Paul is hard to find. Mostly it's dump stuff. So if you have an 1870s pit, you filled it in 1879, 1881, you're good. And you dug another pit. Well, that new pit has to be cleaned out and dug out. Could be dipped. Guess where they dumped the dippings? They dumped it in the Mississippi River. You ever hear about the lock and dam system in the rivers these days? That's because they filled up the river with sediment and dumped garbage and everything in the river, and it raised the thing up. So they had to dig through the lock and dam system. That's from dumping garbage into the rivers. That's what man changed so much. It's the lock and dam system. And they backed that wagon. It wasn't a compactor truck or anything. It was a regular wagon where they loaded it by hand. It had a big brass bell. It went down in the privy. Now, sometimes they don't get all the stuff in the suction when they clean them out because a big piece of pottery or stone or a twig or a wick gets on the suction machine, just like a vacuum cleaner. You put your sock on it, and it stops sucking the stuff out. Well, that happens in the privy too. So sometimes it can be good stuff still. And then they suck the top part off. And then they dump the river. In Stillwater, they dumped it along where that fancy nice white park is by Hooley's, or Hooley's used to be. Down there, that park there, I've got a postcard from 1906 that shows garbage along the shore in Stillwater. All garbage. They dumped, they dipped in White Bear Lake too. They did that dipping over on 96, where White Bear Township and White Bear Lake merge. There's a place that says no dumping and stuff back in the woods. That's been off limits for years, but that was a dump. And they dumped I would dig in spots there, 10, 12-foot spot with two other guys. And we dig down and we're hitting 1910, 1915. All of a sudden there's a pile of 1870 stuff there, 1880 stuff there. That's from dipping, dumping the dippings. So you don't know what you're ever going to find. And
That's a business.
that was a business.
I mean, that'd be like,
Privy,
yeah,
It'd be like Jimmy's Johnny's.
it was like Jimmy. Yeah, it'd be like a septo man, Pinkies.
right.
Except you're actually getting artifacts and everything. And that was a big business. But they dumped that stuff, and of course, you live downtown from Stillwater, wherever they dump it in there. People in Hastings are, having fun. The fun went downstream. Here's a bottle that they even had cures and stuff for horses. Winslow's colic cure for horses. Big from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This bottle came out of the ground, a 13-foot pit. It was near the last bottle in the pit. And this was also a run right. Run right to the car with it. Here's an early Stillwater bottle. This is probably 1880. Henning and Millard, Central Pharmacy, Stillwater, Minnesota, with the early font, hand finished. You ever hear the phrase 2 men and a boy? Anyone ever heard that phrase before? Well, that's because of bottle making. One guy would blow this, another guy would take it with the tongs and set it somewhere and put it in a pile, and then a little boy would come by with a special tool and turn this by hand and finish this top by hand to make the top. The seam only goes up so far, and that indicates it's a hand-finished bottle. Yes, they concocted something. They used a pestle and mortar, and they made it. And they wanted to make sure you got a tingle every time you tried their product, because the tingle made it was working, and that tingle brought you back. Kind of like the crack man now. What did you say? Seal with the cork. Yep, seal with the cork, and then they put a paper label on the back. These may or may not have been returnable at one time. I don't know. I've never found out evidence either way, but it's quite an investment to spend a penny or two for the embossing on the name. But if one guy in town does it, a lot of other guys in town does it. So St. Paul, Minneapolis, I've got hundreds, probably thousands of Minneapolis drugstore bottles, different ones. I find new drugstore bottles every year. I dig different towns. I dig. It's the bottle I find the most new stuff. It's not very valuable, but there's such a variety of new stuff out there. Here's a bottle that's G. Walsh. This was a seltzer bottle. This was like charging drinks nowadays. This would carbonate your thing. This is returnable. G. Walsh, Hudson, Wisconsin, with the glass stem. Czechoslovakia made these bottles. They brought them over. Cool bottle. This is a footed seltzer, which makes it earlier, maybe even 1890s. Yes, go ahead. You guys ask questions too. In about 5 minutes, take questions, I suppose. Here's John Nordstrom, coffin whiskey bottle from Dassel, Minnesota. I don't know if anyone knows where Dassel is. I do. Oh, it's called a coffin because of the shape of the bottle. Looks like a coffin. So it's one of my favorite bottles. John's favorite bottle too, isn't it, John? And we'll finish up with a couple more bottles here. This is bottles that are collectible, not big time for me collectible, but here's a Coca-Cola bottle. And Coca-Cola dated these bottles. This one looks like it's got a 48 here in the pinch bottle. These bottles were designed to be reused, and when you were drinking an ice cold bottle way back when, this grips in your hand. It can't slide out of your hand, so their investment is good. If it was smooth, it would slide right out of your hand and fall on the concrete and break. So, yep, this one's got Marshall, Minnesota. Some towns are really rare. Before Coca-Cola had this hobble skirt, this is called the hobble skirt bottle. They had straight-sided Coke bottles, and those are more valuable. We dug in the Bassett Creek dump. Matter of fact, I was driving a garbage truck in 94, 95. I had a downtown Minneapolis route, and I had a route west downtown. So I'm driving one day. I'm over at the substation by the bus garage in Glenwood. Back up to a dumpster, picking it up. I look over to the right of me, and there's this guy with this huge backhoe. Puts it in like an iron ore hauling, like a Tonka truck. He put it in there. I see all these bottles and stuff. I'm like, oh, I just wanted to. I was done with my route. I wanted to be done, but I couldn't. Anyways, they were taking the stuff, and there's like a 500-acre site. It was a Superfund site. So they took it, they dumped it in a pile on the same property. The city owns this property, or the city or state owns it. So there's a little less problems with that. Once it gets off that property, you have to take it to a landfill. If it stays on the same property contaminated, it's good. So they took 2 different spots, and they dug for maybe a year. But every night after work, I started my route at 2 o'clock normally in downtown Minneapolis. After that, I started at midnight when I did downtown Minneapolis to get done earlier, go out to pick bottles. No one had a problem with it, so probably now they would, but back then they didn't. And I get done at noon or so instead of being done at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I would go down there and pick bottles, and I met my digging partner, Brian, who was in that video, down there. And he was down there, and one day, one of the construction workers was told not to do something. He did it anyways. He got the bulldozer literally stuck in Bassett Creek, where they're rerouting Bassett Creek. The guy was out there just going nuts. I'm going to get fired and stuff. So Brian sees it, goes over and talks to him. Want me to get that out for you? How are you going to do that? He says. I says, well, points to this big loader. Think you can do it? He says, yeah. Pulls him out. That guy, after that, would stage the dump. He'd telescope the hill, so we could dig in the dump every night after that. If we pulled him out of the mud, so Brian pulled him out with the loader. The boss never found out about it. You guys got any questions?
What's the oddest thing you've ever pulled out?
Dentures, I suppose. Some guy was, or some lady was doing their thing and they lost their dentures. And that other guy, yeah.
How do you polish someone?
Oh, well, the bottles get polished. Here's an A-York bottle that's kind of stained and scuzzy. Guy takes the bottles, puts them in a tube with copped Romex, the wire that you run your house with. They chop it up in pieces. They put copper in it, and they put a Teflon prong here. This is filled inside, and the tube is filled outside with stuff. And there's like 2 or 3 prongs here, however you want to do it. And it rotates for 2 days one way. Then he takes it out and turns the tube around, because that copper hitting this embossing, if you don't turn the tube over, there's going to be only one side's going to get clean. So you got to turn it to the other side as the copper goes around it, and it just rotates. You can speed it up or slow. This would be a slow spin. This particular bottle here that got cleaned was a faster spin because there's less. It's more suitable for tumbling.
How long was that?
This was probably in there for 2 weeks.
How long was the other one?
That one I don't know. The guy that did it didn't know how long it was, but it was longer, and it's a more elaborate process. Like rock polisher, it's a tube, and the tubes can weigh 30 pounds, 30 pounds of chopped copper. So, and then if you don't have a heavy duty motor with the belt, variable speed belt, and all the other stuff, but there's it's a endeavor. Trust me, I don't do it myself. I pay someone else to do it. Any more questions? Well, it's a good question. I got a good answer. So when I was younger, I collected aluminum cans and stuff, and I collected aluminum cans since I was about 5, 6 years old. I go to the beach, ride my bicycle at the beach with baskets on it, and collect aluminum cans. And then I heard about the beer can craze about 1970 or so, so I started saving beer cans as well. And then I would go out in the woods and stuff. Well, in Delwood, right by the split of 244 and 96, I found a dump when I was 10, 11 years old. And I dug that for a long time, and I was finding all sorts of bottles. I kept everything. I don't do that anymore. Other plain bottles I kept the unbossed ones. Years later, when I was going through stuff, the plain ones I dug up before, they went to the free box or something at the show, and someone else can have them. But that's how I got into it, and I dug, and then it just progressed. And beer cans, and then bottles, finding out privies, and then driving the trash truck. When I would go by construction sites downtown Minneapolis, downtown St. Paul, or wherever, I'd be delivering a roll-out box to a construction site, and I look up my mirror here, or my door here, and I can see the outline of a privy next door to where I'm dropping this roll-out box, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm coming back tonight or something. So I actually was knowing the dig. I went to get Maxwell's downtown on Washington Street. I was backed up to a dumpster. I could see over the fence, and there was an exposed privy. Well, I broke down for about an hour. I dug it. I took my lunch then. At 2 a.m, I'm digging a privy.
So this is a lifelong hobby.
It's a lifelong hobby.
But do you make anything out of
I can, but it's more of a. I like
Collecting and trading.
collecting is more of the issue than making money. Because if I want to make money, I could. There's other things I can do, and it's fun. It's the pursuit, endeavor to persevere, and it's always fun to find something new. Because every town I go to, like I said, a small town, I can go to Waconia, Minnesota, and dig, and I'll find a Waconia drugstore bottle, something like this, that I never saw before. Drugstore bottles are the #1 bottle you find that are new, and a whiskey bottle would be probably next. And speaking about looking for drugstore bottles, there was a only knower bottle from Colfax, Wisconsin. The guy that got me several permissions out there, he wanted the only knower something fierce. We dug 2 of them, 3 of them actually. I kept one, Brian kept one, and we gave this guy one. He got the first one, we got the next 2. Well, we did a presentation for the Colfax Historical Society in Colfax, Wisconsin, and he had taken his drugstore bottle, wrapped it up in paper towel, and put it on his front seat. Something happened. That bottle drew legs and jumped and broke on his driveway. So my buddy Brian, he was devastated. You guys want to come back to Colfax? I says, we dug everything. Well, I broke my Colfax drugstore bottle. Mind you, we dug 60, 70 pits in Colfax, at least, and found 3 of these bottles. We found broken pieces. So Brian stepped up the plate and gave the guy his old Lenore bottle instead. The guy was ecstatic. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a 2-part. During Prohibition, where did the speakeasies get their bottles?
It could be anywhere. There was the Rags Bottles and Bones Men's. And there was a lot. Secondhand market back then was big for bottles and jugs and stuff. You'd go find some guy that maybe cleaned out the privy and washed them out a little bit, or did a barn or some other place. But there were a lot of bottles. And speaking of that, that's a good question. So after Prohibition, 6 months after Prohibition, they didn't have this particular embossing on bottles. But after Prohibition, 6 months, 1934, like beginning of 1934, they had bottles that said, "This bottle not to be sold under federal law." What's the second part?
The second part was, did people use, how did they get bottles if they had stills?
They could use jugs, bottles, secondhand. It's kind of like the collectibles market now or something like that, or they were very crafty during the Depression and before the Depression. They were very crafty. There was a lot more rural settings where there was a building full of this or that. You go back in the old days and look in city directories, there's secondhand bottle dealers that would do that. Travel around.
And then sell them even if they had embossing. So why if there's this secondhand bottle business going on all the time, why are these getting thrown into prison?
They just did. They didn't care. They were high. Didn't matter. They threw them in there.
They were sneaking.
They're sneaking. And if let's say you got a habit, and you get there's heroin, there's laudanum, there's all sorts of stuff in this stuff, and you're getting a tingle you're getting cured because you had a tingle. That tingle cured you for a night. Just cured you for one night. because the other pain didn't matter. So you need to go back and get another tingle another night. And then if you're ordering this stuff and your spouse or your brother or whoever, you don't want to, and you're peeing or whatever, and we found pits like that one in Brainerd and a couple other ones. We had a pit that had 300-400 drugstore bottles in Brainerd. Not all of them were embossed, but they were 16-ounce bottles. They sure did. That tingle cures you. Just remember that tingle. And that's the Pure Food and Drug Act took that away. It was a cure before 1906, June 30th. After June 30th, 1906, it was a remedy. And then after a while, it was just no more. There's another angle. That's another thing I didn't touch on, but there's guys that scuba dive lakes and stuff. Matter of fact, I've talked to guys that scuba dived in White Bear. And in the old days, wintertime, the lake's frozen. They'll take a wagon load of garbage out, dump it in the middle of the lake, and when it comes springtime, it's gone. There's piles of bottles in the middle of White Bear Lake where they dump wagon loads of garbage and stuff, and it's the middle of White Bear Lake. There's piles of that stuff out there. Okay, now you got me going for another story. I got a story of stories. So all right. So I'm in Menominee, Wisconsin, and I'm digging, and this older guy come out here. This is like 15, 20 years ago. Old guy, about 70, 75. I'm 62, so I was 40 or so when it happened. Comes up and tells me, he says, what are you guys doing? He's just strolling through the alley with his dog. We're digging the outhouse pit. He says, no. I says, yeah. He says, really? I says, yeah. How'd you find it? I says, with this. Oh, really? He says, well, I got a story for you. He says, back in the 40s, we had, me and some neighbor kids would go out there at Halloween. We'd knock over the privies. So this one guy, privy we knocked over every Halloween, moved his privy, put a little canvas or something or whatever or cardboard over the privy hole, and 4 figures come walking across the field at dusk. About 5 minutes into watching this, all of a sudden there was only 3 figures up. The 4th figure fell in the hole. He never had his privy knocked over ever again after that. Well, the blue bottles appeal for color. It does amplify the value. It makes it more desirable to the non-collector because of the color. But the rarity and stuff of some of these bottles, like the rarest bottle probably up here is the, oh God, that's a good question. But this one's particularly valuable to me. It's Stillwater Local, back bar decanter. They're sat in the back of a bar with all the other things. It's the connection, yes. Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, here's a Jorg, which is the toughest of one of the Jorg's variations, the second toughest one. There's another one called William Jorg, which is tougher. But this is an 18. Some of these bottles have codes on them for dates. This is SB&G Company, Streeter Brothers Glass Company out of Streeter, Illinois. They've got in business around the late 1880s. And I dated a lot of their bottles. This particular bottle also has this bottle not to be sold. So hams or Eiffel or anyone else couldn't use your bottle. You didn't want them to use your bottle. If you had your bottles, someone else's, and the reason they had problems with bottles, let's say it's 1890, 20 below zero out, and you got a derelict right hauling your wagon full of bottles and kegs delivering thing, and he wants to go sit and imbibe in a bar. Well, it's 20 below zero, 8% alcohol is not going to survive. Maybe 80% alcohol is going to survive, but so he's out there drinking away, and when the wagon would go, the bottles would rattle and they wouldn't freeze. But it stopped for 2 or 3 hours. And your guy wanted to go drink, come back out, and every one of your bottles has exploded. Well, now you're in a shortage for bottles. So you go to Hams, what you got? Take all Hams bottles, put a label on it. So you want to use, you go. Then they can prosecute them. There's examples of prosecution of bottle theft back in the old days. As far as value, these would probably be more valuable than the embossed stuff because this is harder to find. Paper label whiskey, J.M. Davis, silver pitcher. It's got a little seal there and stuff. It had a seal that would cork, it would break. And it looks like almost like an olive oil bottle, but that bottle and the print, when it comes out of the ground, if there's nothing on it, that's a leverite. Yeah. You leave it right where you found it. That's why they went to shoulder embossing, because the embossing was they had a machine. Now a lot of these brewers and stuff, this was all done by hand. This bottling was not automatically. There was an extensive hand operation, very labor intensive operation. A matter of fact, there's cases on these seltzer bottles here. This is highly pressure. This is really thick walled glass. But there's examples of a bottler losing an eye when this bottle explodes because he's putting too much pressure in it. And this was sold to the saloon, and he would charge your drink with you could probably have a spray fight, if you really wanted to, Here's another example of a drugstore from Brainerd, McFadden Drug Company. Comes in amber. The amber version would be the rare version. I don't know if you've got an amber one from Bain and McFadden, or Bain and Johnson is what it is. But and this one's got the glass maker in the bottom. Klondike, AM, F, and Company. That's the glass maker. A lot of times they made the glass maker on the bottom of these bottles. So let's say competition found your bottle. Well, he made a nice looking bottle. I want the same kind of bottle. So they write to the AMF Manufacturing Company. Any more questions?
I have something from our backyard.
Go ahead. I'll do show and tell. If anyone's got show and tell, I'll take a look. That's perfect.
A number of years ago, we have 3 kids.
Any more questions? Thanks for showing up. Everyone, thanks for showing up. Oh, my book? That's her. The caboose is back there.